right, so we are waiting on the President's 8 o'clock announcement of his cabinet reshuffle. We've just got the news that it's been delayed by an hour. Joining us in studio now is Devin Murugan. And Devin, I know that you were listening with a keen ear to that interview with Prof. Keith Engel on tax. JJ, your sense, do you think the President should be like just cutting a deal with SARS and saying, guys, I messed up, let me pay you the tax?
Cut that deal, because all citizens at some point slack one way or another, and the mistake is to run away. It's like if you own a bank, your worst thing is to not answer their phone, So in this case, the President has to cut that deal to show citizens how to be responsive and responsible when your tax issue is in question, right? And I think I did hear you saying that the Reserve Bank is a different animal. But I do think even there should be a way in which you can go there and clarify stuff so that you are not now running around and trying to do chicken and chicken
but at
and
the
mouse.
same time, JJ, I mean, you've got to also admit the fact that aesthetically, you have a citizen on the one hand, but you have the President on the other. So while you're saying it might set a good example, just the enormity of the position in the portfolio alone, speaks to something else, doesn't it?
No, absolutely. I mean, that's what the opposition parties are baying their blood. But he's got political cover. What you see what happens in Parliament, where they've just said, we're not going to impeach. So how does he use this space, right, in the meantime?
Because it's going to hang over him, as you said,
it's going to hang over him
until it's dealt with. I understand that your guest is on the line, just to let you know, but I know you want to say something before we go to him.
Let's go straight to the Economist and just find out exactly what the perspective is come an hour from now. So 1 month ago today, some economists called for President Cyril Ramaphosa to make sweeping changes to his cabinet in a bid to boost the country's ailing economy. They said key ministries related to the economy need to meet his targets for economic growth and recovery. Now, it came as two of the country's umbrella bodies for business made similar detailed calls to the President. Iraj Abedian is the chief economist at Pan-African Capital Holdings, a former advisor to the government as well. Iraj, thanks indeed for talking to us. I mean, both economists and business calling for the President to place a minister who should have, and ministers who should have a number of key characteristics, must be willing to change their views in the face of evidence, must not detract from decisive and urgent implementation to speed up the economy. Is this reshuffle, you think, going to satisfy those characteristics?
Well, thank you very much for inviting me. Is it going to do it? I don't know. Based on the President's track record, unfortunately, the answer may be no, but we hope and always pray for the best. Remember, 5 years ago, the President made an undertaking to the nation that he would restructure the cabinet, not reshuffle, restructure, meaning merge ministries, cut out the fat, streamline the cabinet so that the public sector can become more professional in line with the NDP and in line with the requirements of any economy, but especially a society with such desperate economic and social issues. 5 years later, he has done zilch, and he now wants to add another minister on top of existing ministers. I really hope that with this reshuffle, he will cut the overhead. This cabinet is way too lumpy, way too expensive, way too ineffective and indecisive, and at times counterproductive. Look at what they've done 5 years for our energy and for water and other infrastructure. So I think there is a lot more than reshuffle which is needed, and we just hope and pray that ultimately 5 years later the President will do the right thing and not try every mistake before he does the right thing.
Let's go into some of these ministries, all right? Because, I mean, they typically so tied and connected to the economy. You mentioned about the NDP. I mean, what we're searching for 5 to 6% growth there. Ministry of Transport, in the midst of our crisis with ports, rail logistics infrastructure, which are in a poor state, I mean, this directly affects the economy, and by extension, Iraj, it affects the state coffers, doesn't it? Because you're paying tax as a business when you take your goods through these things. Will a new minister have the impact for the better in that particular ministry?
I think that there are a lot of interrelated network ministries. Minister of Transport, you mentioned, Minister of Energy, Minister of Water, and Trade and Industry. and of course the National Treasury. These are the key elements, the key planks of keeping the economy together, or doing nothing and watching the economy falling apart. Unfortunately, so far, over the past 5 years, it's been the latter. We've all known, the minister talked about, minister after minister, the president has talked about, but they do nothing. They do observation without action and implementation. Minister of Transport at the moment, and of course related to that, our rail and harbors are absolutely critical for our exports. They are critical for our competitiveness. Minister of Energy, we don't have to talk about. State enterprises have been an absolute chaos. And trade and industry has been silent. So I think you have a situation that the president 5 years ago came in on the platform of turning the economy around, and he has done precious little, even in areas such as energy that everybody now knows the answer except the cabinet.
Let's talk about the Department of Public Enterprises. I mean, the economists and business have said that they hope that any move, any reshuffle, should come with some sort of clarity on the role of the Department of Public Enterprises. Just given where Transnet and Eskom is, you know, one wonders what happens here. Because remember, there's also a critique against what's been said to be political interference from that particular department.
You see, we have a situation, Devin, that in South Africa, and it's not new, it's been there for 30 years, where you have a Department of State Enterprises that is the asset manager. It's not a policy player. The Department of Policymakers are Department of Energy, Department of Transport, and so on and so forth. But Department of State Enterprises is meant to take care of the governance and the asset value of those public enterprises. This is a critical plank of our economy. And because of the political tensions, because the cabinet cannot and has shown not be able to sit around the table, and the ministers with the power of president to resolve and reconcile policies with the assets that they have to manage, we have an absolute chaos and loss of value. Never mind enhancing assets. Assets are going literally daily down the trend. Look at our railway. 5 years ago, our railway capacity was about 2.5 times what it is now. Our energy going only one way. Our roads the same. So I think it's this type of fragmentation within the cabinet and ministers thinking that each of them is a fiefdom to himself. They come out and out of context make statements. Out of coordination with other ministers, with the president's policies, they have their own fiefdom and they seem to be accountable to nobody. This is not the way to run a business of the cabinet. This is not the way to enhance the economy. This is not the way to instill confidence in the business community and, very importantly, confidence in the citizens.
Yep. Iraj, as I wrap up with my last question here, the rule of law, essential to any business environment. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with the Ministry of Police. Every day, there's something new on the law front.
Yeah, the rule of the law, the judgment is the fact that we've been grey listed. And remember, this is not something that the cabinet was not aware of it. At the time of Minister Mboweni, he raised the issue that we were on the radar to be grey listed and things had to be done. And again, on that rule of law, you have to have the right ministries around the table to not just make the right law, but implement the law, and not just implement the law, to be seen to be implementing it without prejudice and favor. Whether it's the president or the minister, whether a highly connected or disconnected individual, the law has to take its course. And unfortunately, we have not seen this, and it has been a case that the cabinet has known this. The president has known this, Minister of Finance has known this, Minister of Justice has known this, Minister of Police has known that, and none of them has done enough. And collectively, they have failed to do enough to prevent the country from being grey listed. That is an absolute abomination for the country, not something that South Africa should take pride in it.
All right, so we'll watch carefully in about just over an hour's time how this unfolds. More news coming up after the break.